Good afternoon, Jacob Field here. I'm not quite ready to get started. I'll wait a couple of minutes, but if you could just confirm that you can hear and see me correctly, you should be seeing the property investment event slide there in front of you. If you can chat over on the right-hand side of your screen, if you can enter into the box. Yes, you can hear me, say hello, that'd be great. You can ask questions at any time or chat to me directly. Just make sure you are selecting the chat or question as required. So I'll pop it back on mute again. Probably a couple of minutes away from getting started. Thank you. Good afternoon, Jacob Field speaking, introducing this today's webcast event. So in the last few days, we have reached out and did ask which suburb or region you'd like us to focus on as detailed in our National Top 10 Sweet Spots report, which was co-authored with Terry Ryder from hotspotting.com.au and actually featured on the cover story of Money Magazine this month. Response on the Facebook group asking which area you'd like me to take you through today. So welcome. Today we're going to be focusing on Wollongong, which is obviously in New South Wales and was included in this report. Just getting started now, so if you can see and hear me correctly, can you just let me know in the chat bar over on the right-hand side? There have been a couple of you who have said that you can. But there is also someone else here who's just mentioning there is an audio problem, potentially. If you are having problems with the pixelation or resolution of the screen and image, just try resizing your browser in and out. Do that a couple of times to change the proportion of the page, and that usually fixes it. If it doesn't, or if you're having any audio problems, refresh the browser window and it'll automatically log you back in correctly. I will be trying to keep today specifically to the hour time period. I understand people are taking time out from their busy days to view, so I won't go over if I can manage it. For those of you that would like to stick around after the event, as I did last week, I went through some specific areas that other investors or you guys would like to focus on outside of Wollongong. I did take the time to go into a couple of other regions. So if you'd like to do that at the end, do stick around. I'll jump in today with a particular focus, I suppose, on buying below market. It's probably not a good example to do that today with Wollongong because there's not a huge amount of stock on market from some of my pre-research before this afternoon. So it might have been better with sort of low days on market, etc. in Wollongong. There's not a huge amount of stock on the market at the moment in a lot of the key suburbs that I've identified. So our options for potentially negotiating and buying below market are somewhat limited, but we can definitely fairly assess market value, potentially not buying far below what we assess as current market value, but I'll detail the process anyway. Let's just jump right in. Just moving over to the slides now, one moment. A little bit about me. I do just run through this quickly each week. My name is Jacob Field and I founded Ripe House in 2011, but I've been investing for over 10 years. I bought my first property here in Tasmania when I was 19. I would classify myself as a DIY property investor, so I've always believed in empowering myself with knowledge and a network and surrounded myself with like-minded investors and pushed the envelope personally by developing my understanding, learning, knowledge. In that process, I've gone in too far in one direction and then had to overcompensate and go back into the other direction. What I mean by that is potentially focus too much on capital growth at the detriment of cash flow. Got tied to my 9-to-5 job in Sydney for too long, and then realised, cash flow is the way out. Really focused on that as just one example of probably overcompensating and in my journey over the last 12 or 13 years now, I think. As I mentioned, I have made mistakes, but it all comes back to really learning from those mistakes, empowering yourself with knowledge and moving forward in your investment journey. So that's a term I might mention a little bit tonight: DIY property investment, and empowering myself to develop knowledge towards what I want to do with retirement and the lifestyle that I want to live with my family. I was able to stop working a few years ago in the 9-to-5 based on primarily my property portfolio, and now moving forward with Ripe House, which is a labour of love, but it really does combine property and technology, which are two of my main core areas of expertise and joy. Moving forward, we were, as mentioned, focused on the cover story of Money Magazine this month, so 133 best streets in the hottest suburbs. So Terry Ryder and Terry was kind enough to provide the hottest suburbs or regions across the country. He did actually provide me a list of 20. Only 10 made the cut, whereby 10 we were actually able to define and find very clear leading streets within, which I call the Ripe House sweet spots, within those regions that are going to potentially amplify and lead capital growth forward for those regions. So in that research, we did identify 133 streets, which was featured in Money, and it was all tied together in our national top 10 sweet spot report. So they were the suburbs and regions that I did ask that you'd like covered today. And as mentioned, Wollongong did come out on top. So something I haven't mentioned before, I have actually started rolling this out to some of my some Ripe House users privately. We've got some amazing new functionality coming out. We look like we're probably a week away to announcing this to a wider audience. It really is going to put this National Sweet Spot report into practice. It's going to really amplify your ability to automatically find the regions, the suburbs, the streets, the properties that really match your criteria. It's going to leverage opinion and bring it all together for you in a big funnel and spitting out the properties down the bottom. And it's going to allow you to track those properties very clearly, compare them with each other, and supercharge everything you can do generally now in Ripe House to a far higher and more effective degree. So that's coming out very shortly, and there have been some of you that have already been testing and using this software, this extension of Ripehouse. If you'd like to get involved, let me know. If you're already a Ripehouse user, let me know. And if you'd really like to start looking at it and using it, let me know. But do look out for that. Moving forward, so the basis of, I suppose, the conversation today is around the Myth of Capital Growth infographic series, which we did release a couple of weeks ago. Installment 3 was last week. It is a framework for thinking about investment. Last week I did focus on the infographic number 1, which was the myth of capital growth at a suburb and regional level. How do you identify suburbs and regions that potentially are going to outperform the growth of its neighbours or outperform their macro environment? It did take you through that process. The second infographic in the series focused on street level sweet spots. So the Ripehouse sweet spots, how you can identify streets in suburbs that are going to outperform or amplify the capital growth at a suburb level. But today I'm going to focus on the infographic number 3, I suppose, in a little bit more detail, because that focuses on the property and potentially how you can leverage knowledge in the market and the property specifics, comparable sales to potentially negotiate under market value. So I will use that as a little bit of a focus. That was my plan of attack today, but with Wollongong winning with 9 votes, I think, it probably is not the best area to apply this third element of the infographic series, but we will try and have a run with it. Yeah, so this is the infographic title, Buying Below Market. What does that actually mean? For me, it's all about establishing fair market value for a property. And if a market's moving quite quickly, it's sometimes difficult to do. Where do you draw the line in the sand? But it's all about finding that fair market assessment for the property, looking at actual comparables. I'll jump through to the slides here. Looking at actual comparables to do that, to start that process. And an actual comparable has to be in similar condition and specification. So people might, and you might start with looking at the specifications and leave it there. Sometimes you get a generic or download a generic valuation report, which really doesn't go anywhere near as far as you need to in the process of finding comparables. It's not enough just to have 3 other comparable sales, which are 3-bedroom houses, and they may have sold recently. When I say recently, 3 months is optimum, up to 6 months is a comparable, and outside of that, you're starting to really you're starting to really compromise, I suppose, the process. So recency of sales is very important, but similar specifications is taken for granted. But the real key is making sure the property is comparable in terms of condition. Is it presented the standard of property in the condition very similar? That needs to be done. We need to be sure we're comparing apples with apples. And then making sure the property is in a similar location. So I will drill down in a minute what particular elements of location are important to compare apples with apples, but making sure not just the property is in a similar geographic location within the suburb. It may actually be on the other side of the suburb, but it's actually in a similar the street makeup is quite similar. So similar levels of tenants, similar level of property type, similar level of yield, rent per week, similar amenity to the key train station or shopping district or school. So as long as it's in a similar distance away, it might be on the opposite side of the school. It's all about comparing location versus other similar locations, and it's not necessarily next door in doing that. So that's what I'm talking about, and it's very important to firstly assess comparable properties to help us appraise fair market value for a property, bringing together those comparables to do that. Then it's about potentially negotiating under market. So some of the things that I look at with a property to potentially negotiate under the market, I suppose the big banner at the top is I prefer to have the selling agent do the negotiation with the vendor as opposed to me negotiating with the selling agent. So if you can do that without getting the selling agent's backup, it's probably more effective. And that's how I've generally had some good experiences in negotiation in the past. Some of the things I'm doing there, being really sure of the comparable properties that I get, making sure they are in similar condition. And in that process, you're probably going to come across a few comparables that you're taking off your list that are actually superior properties. The selling agent may have presented those to. So the first thing, ask for a list of comparable properties that the selling agent is basing their price expectation on. Go through the one by one with a selling agent. Go back and do your process. Find your individual comparables that you're sure of are in a similar condition, similar location, and similar or recent sale. If you've crossed any off the list, which may actually be superior properties, and you've taken them off your list, but they're actually still on the agent's lists, that's how you can start, demonstrating your understanding of the market and actually bringing the expectation of the selling agent down to, realistic expectation and demonstrating in that scenario. If you're bringing the comparables down and demonstrating that, then you're demonstrating what you're willing to pay. But then you can introduce other properties, potentially slip them in that may be inferior. If you're doing your due diligence and homework, you may be able to create and muddy the water a little bit with other properties that you introduce into the mix. But then you can also leverage other information that you do find out. So is there public housing around? Any of the negative factors of the property that may compromise the sale? Tenants in the property that are presenting the property for sale, controversially or cluttering it up, or is it tired? You're bringing all the property, you're creating and muddying the waters with anything you can there. Are you seeing any price distress? Has the property got big red flags across it? Is it fibro, etc.? Has that caused the sales campaign to be compromised? Has it gone to multiple offer, building and pest, and then retraction, etc.? Is it visibly in distress where they have started discounting the property? Has that discounting started to be ramped up? Has the time period between discounting started to shorten? Did they start the sales campaign as an auction or price withheld, and then did they then either get passed in an auction or stop the auction altogether and start with a fixed listing price? Has that happened? That's when you're going to start smelling blood in the water, and that's what I'm looking out for. So all of these things, public housing is a nice one, so you can create doubt and I suppose not doubt in the selling agent's mind, but if you are highlighting these things and then you present an offer which may be lower than fair market value according to your assessment, then the selling agent may be taking that offer to the vendor and also justifying that offer with the information you have provided. It's often in the selling agent's interest, obviously, to get the sale and to move on to the next listing, etc. So if you're providing the evidence and the reasons that you might be bringing that price expectation down and managing that process so the selling agent negotiates almost on your behalf with the vendor, then you're setting yourself up to potentially buy below market. So we can look at a few of those things when we are going through the individual properties a little bit later on. So this is all about, this was infographic 2 in the series. You can check out this infographic series via the Ripe House blog. Always, it's a good thing to subscribe to the blog, and you will be the first to know of any updates or new information or new research coming through. The Ripe House blog is www.ripehouse.com.au/blog. So check that out. Infographic 2 in the series that is on that blog is all about street level analysis and finding the sweet spots, the Ripe House sweet spots in a suburb that are going to be likely to drive a higher capital growth than the average capital growth that you would experience across the suburb. So this little graphic here is not all streets are created equal. Each suburb has a local dynamic. You're potentially a local expert for the suburb that you live in and potentially have lived in for a while. You know the areas to avoid. You know the areas that are potentially gentrifying or improving or gaining the most upside from recent infrastructure or public-private spend. You know the sweet spots. And the sweet spots are not necessarily the nicest looking property. We have a Ripe House defined sweet spot. I'll just get through to that. Our Ripe House defined sweet spot, which is a beautiful mix of individual elements at a street level that, when combined, represent excellent opportunity to outperform the suburb overall in terms of capital growth. The Ripe House sweet spot, as described, is low areas of public housing in the street, lots of the in-demand property type. So if people are moving into the suburb or there's lots of extra demand for 2-bedroom units, that's the class of property that people are demanding. There's lots of those 2-bedroom units in the street. And then you've got these big 3 of rental that relate to tenancies. And it's actually quite a rare mix to see high rents combined with high tenant demand. So I'm talking about the meet in the middle. Between 30 and 70% tenants in that street is the nice meet in the middle, who are paying above average rent and also accompanied with higher than average yield. At a street level, these 5 things combined is very, very powerful. It's demonstrating that a lot of the people who are moving towards the area, looking, due to the employment or infrastructure spend and all the things I talk about in infographic 1, they're actually choosing, probably more likely than so in higher numbers, to actually live in these streets, these ripe house sweet spots. They're demanding the in-demand property type, whatever that may be for the particular suburb, and low public housing is assuring stability in our capital growth, in our tenancies, in our vacancy rates. Our street appeal is not compromised, etc. So that's a very powerful combination. I'll just skip back a little moment. Some of the big 3 things that we also look at a street level in terms of amenities within the suburb are transport, shopping and schools. So these are really the big 3. Other amenities like doctors' surgeries, hospitals, parks, cafes, restaurants, etc. We have measured them all. At Ripe House, we're all about data and research, and we've got a large data set of all property sales and for sale listings, for rent listings going back 3 years. We've also got the location of all key transport, shopping and school amenities, and we've mapped the relationship between distance away from each of those things and price. And if you can see here, right on the doorstep of transport is relatively good, but about 1,100 metres away from the main transport hub is the sweet spot. So still walking distance, but not right on the doorstep of a local train station. Schools is interesting. It's 250 metres away is the absolute sweet spot for schools. Shopping is anything out to 1,200 metres is roughly on the mark. But you can notice that all of them generally drop off quite substantially after you are over 1,500 metres away. So that's just a little bit of an insight into how proximity to the key amenities potentially can affect value or appraised value for properties. It's actually probably no indication of future capital growth. It's just showing how to assess value for a property and how that may be affected by its location. Okay. Moving into the next one, another element to look at that has a very close correlation to property value and appraised value is public housing. I won't go into this graphic in a huge amount of detail, but I will just say expect to pay 25% more than the average suburb price to be in a street that has 0% public housing. So 0% public housing has a huge positive effect on the appraised value for property in that street, and 18% or more public housing. If you're buying in a street with 18% or more public housing, expect to pay 20% less than the suburb average. So dramatic effect due to on property value by public housing. Now that was an average of each metro versus regional. You can see the differences there with a different line across the country. So each suburb has a different tolerance and sensitivity to public housing, but it does demonstrate very clearly the very strong relationship between public housing and property value. Yeah, I did mention that I did skip forward and change the order there. The sweet spot, it's critically important to buy in streets that are primed to lead price growth for the suburb overall. You don't want to be investing in an area that potentially is a dead spot where locals know to avoid, where all the new population and demand coming into the suburb is avoiding. We want to be investing in the areas that are leading the suburb forward in terms of demand, utility, and potential for capital growth. And that's the combination of, according to our research, which delivers that at a street level. How does it deliver it and how much does it deliver it? Well, we ran through all of our property data. So we tracked sales in each street across the country, put properties in or out of the sweet spots in each suburb. And the 3 months through to September, if you had invested in the Ripe House sweet spots, you would have outperformed the remainder of the suburb by over 20%. So 21.9% capital growth above and beyond the suburb norm. You know, when I say that, if the suburb achieved 3% capital growth, which was roughly what the nation did achieve as an average over a 3-month period through to September, which is obviously very good. If you had actually invested in Ripe House sweet spot by average in that same period, you would have actually achieved closer to 4% capital growth. So there's a dramatic difference, and 21.9% capital growth over that period and every period is a huge amount of extra growth, which is going to amplify the growth and performance of your portfolio, move you through it quicker, But perhaps more importantly, on the flip side, if you're actually investing in the dead spots for capital growth, on the other side of that 3%, you may have actually had very substandard growth. Everything's a bell curve, and to be a sweet spot, you're on one positive side of the bell curve, but by the same token, there's other streets in each suburb that are actually not performing as well as the suburb average. So you have to be very onto it and very key. Within Ripe House, we do talk about the Ripe House sweet spot, how you can implement it, and we can demonstrate how to do that in any suburb across Australia very shortly. So to find a sweet spot and how to invest in them, it's not a black box. I do feel there's a lot of influencers in the industry, a lot of information sources that try and make this type of property investment or understanding property investment principles a black box. Something that only they hold the key to, and you put the money in and then you get the service out, etc. Or you go to the education and they are the only provider of the property type, etc. out the back of it. Sometimes I think that's a little bit counterproductive. I think empowering the individual, empowering the investor with knowledge and understanding and education and support, and investors helping each other is a far more sustainable and scalable way for us all to invest together. So this is not a black box. I think bringing it back to common sense. You're a local, you live in the suburb that you live in, you know the streets you would like to invest in. How can we potentially apply that across the country? At another level above that, last week I did go into a lot of more detail about common sense investing at a suburb and regional level. So do check out the recording from last week on our YouTube channel there, and that will demonstrate that common sense approach at that level. Because with common sense, I suppose we can avoid spinning our wheels. We can look at things rationally, potentially how professionals in the market might be approaching things with a very refined and efficient due diligence process. In these markets with a lot of upside, so any of these markets featured in the National Top 10 Sweet Spots report, they are generally on at 7 and 8 o'clock on the property clock. Some of them may have been there for a little bit longer, and some of them may now be sort of moving towards the top of the property clock. I do know Logan's probably one there on the National Top 10 Sweet Spot report, where we have covered it over the last 3 or 4 months, probably going back a little bit longer than that in our webcasts. Back then, days on market was slightly higher. You still had some nice stock levels in some of the key sweet spots across the suburb. On the back of demand and the suburb moving through the growth cycle, we're starting to see a lot of that good stock drying up. And then you start seeing some of the properties left on the market with higher days on market. They may have been through a few cycles where offers have been made, building and pests have been performed, settlements fallen through, it's gone back on the market. That sort of thing is happening, and that's what is left in the market over this process. But when the market is fast moving, it's starting to come up on the radar of a larger audience. You've got to have your due diligence process right, and you've got to not compromise on the individual streets that you invest in. That's why I think it's important to invest and use the right tools to help you do that, and developing that local mindset and applying it at a property by property level, so you can potentially negotiate and position your conversation with the agent. As I mentioned, we are basing when we went out to the Facebook group, we did offer, apart from Liverpool, which we did cover last week, 9 of the suburbs within our top 10 sweet spot report for the investigation or further investigation in today's webcast. By popular demand, and on that Facebook group, we had a huge response. I think there was over 30 or so votes, which is really good. It's get involved on the Facebook page, come across and say hello. If you've got any questions at any time, it's a great way to ask those questions, and we can leave the questions there for everyone else to see the answers and build upon that way. So do get involved in the Facebook page. By popular demand, Wollongong was chosen to be focused on today. So I have touched base with a few locals, a few experts in the field to get some suburb lists. I have used the Ripe House research tools to find some suburbs. I will go through that in some detail shortly. As I mentioned, let's look for some key street areas. So not just enough to find the suburbs of interest within Wollongong, but the individual streets. We're going to be doing some comparable analysis and potentially how we can set ourselves up to buy below market. And I'm going to be jumping in now to the Ripe House tool set for us to do this research. If you just give me one moment, I'll just switch the screens over. Okay, so just let me know. You should be able to see the Ripe House My Suburbs page there once it does come through. Let me know if that's not updated for you. If you are seeing a little bit blurry or pixelation on the screen, as I mentioned, just resize the browser in and out or refresh the page as a worst case scenario. Do start asking questions, get them sort of primed. I am trying to try and wind this up at 1:30, so if you are on your lunch break, you can be prompt. I can send the answers to the questions out via email afterwards. And if you would like to stick around after the hour, I can sit and go into some more detail in any suburbs with you individually, as I did last week. Just starting off my search, so I did touch base with Matt Knight, who's an old friend on Summersoft Property Forum going back a while, but Matt is actually the founder of Precium, buyers agents in the Illawarra, South Coast, New South Wales area. I did ask for his opinion and thoughts on the Wollongong area in the last week. I have got his notes here, and we can overlay that with what we do know from Terry's research, from the National Top 10 Sweet Spots report, and the research I did there, and also what we are seeing in the market using the Ripe House tool. So we can perform searches within Ripe House. So across Wollongong, you can click on the click to search. We can click on the capital growth button. We can select the catchment area we'd like to focus on, Illawarra and South Coast. We can select price ranges, etc., distance from CBD. That will bring back to us an ordered list for suburbs based on their capital growth potential, whereabouts they are on the property clock. The higher the capital growth score, the more likely the suburb is likely to be at 7 or 8 o'clock on the property clock in the catchment area. That's a good way of shortlisting and starting our search within suburbs. One little bit of an asterisk against that, and I have noticed it quite a little bit through Wollongong, is a lot of suburbs in Wollongong area have quite low sales volumes, and they have done for a little while. So you're going to start seeing a little bit of variance in this pure the pure numbers-based scoring. It is good for a guide, and for higher volume areas, it's great. In the Wollongong area, it takes a little bit more elbow grease in trying to find some individual suburbs. So I have actually done that. This is going to be the core of the new functionality we are rolling out. It's actually wrapping that all up into some human recommendations and some numbers recommendations, and it's helping with this whole funnel all the way down through region, suburb, sweet spot, property, and appraisal for us. At this particular point, though, let's just jump in. We will look at Wollongong. We will assume that we can go in and do the searching and suburb searching, which I have done in this process. The suburb I did actually choose to feature within the sweet spot report was actually Wollongong CBD. We've got a lot of sample. We've got a lot of properties on the market, 68 on the market at the moment. That was one of the reasons to choose, that you have to actually be able to buy in the suburb and in the sweet spot once identified. The one thing I did notice throughout Wollongong, we've got lots of suburbs that otherwise would have provided great investment candidates, but they do have very high levels of owner-occupiers. Now, one thing within the Ripe House sweet spot, a street with between 30 and 70% capital growth demonstrates it is in demand by the core of the tenancy market. And when you combine that, as mentioned, with higher than average rent and yields in the street, it's not just where lots of tenants are demanding to live, but also where they're paying a premium to do that. They are the clustering and demand, the cumulative effect of that demand is pushing that upwards pressure on rents and yields, and potentially hasn't yet been reciprocated into increasing price. So it's a very powerful combination. We do like to cap it out at 70% tenants in the street, just to ensure that we do still have 30% owner occupiers. If we do want capital growth, a large or reasonably large proportion of that capital growth over the short term, the next 18 to 24 months, is potentially going to be on the back of other owner occupiers in the street, improving their properties and improving the street overall, and therefore yields might drop as property prices start increasing on the back of organic growth within the suburb, but also those owner occupiers in the street improving their property. So I like to see that middle ground between 30 and 70% tenants is a real sweet spot for us. As mentioned, a lot of these suburbs potentially did look good in my investigation. The West Wollongong's near the uni there, great employment hub, sort of middle market, Wollongong, Fig Tree, etc. They did present, everything else was lining up. apart from that level of tenants that was required. So it did come down to a few areas. I might just give a quick synopsis of my thoughts and findings now, and then we'll jump into them individually. So the core of the research and focus within Ripehouse is specifically on the Wollongong CBD area. So what you can see here in the white in front of us, each of the red icons are current on-market properties. So Ripehouse goes out across the internet as Google would and amalgamates listings all into one place for us. So I've got those icons there. That's current on-market property. We've got current on-market for rent and also sold properties, which we can view as icons on the map. This is the main suburb map analysis page within Ripehouse. It's very powerful, and it's where you can do some of your really detailed, intricate research. By the same token, I could have equally have selected North Wollongong, which is defined as this area here. You can see, the separation here is just across the border, a very similar standard of property. And this little patch just to the north of the Wollongong CBD area is very similar in terms of property and demand. So I'm looking as the core piece of the market where strong demand is likely to lead to short-term capital growth in the Wollongong CBD and the North Wollongong area. Now, the property class that is currently most in demand by tenants and owner-occupiers alike in these two suburbs are two-bedroom units. It is the middle part of this market. It's high density housing. That's what you should be focusing on to drive the broad appeal. Oh, sorry, to achieve and have broad appeal for the property, which will have the capital growth on the back of it. That's the core middle market commoditized type of property throughout here. A little bit of a caveat. So Wollongong itself, CBD, is quite a large geographic area with I think 6,000 dwellings. Over here along the Princes Highway out towards West Wollongong, you do have clusters of houses. You've got lots of one-bedroom units spread throughout. You've got some terraces down here in the south. And then over on the water side, you've got some of the prestige property in Wollongong. So you've got lots of mixes. You've got lots of classes of property. When you come into the Ripehouse tool, which streets do we invest in potentially, and what sort of property do we focus on? We can click on the View Suburb Report button down here. The only reason why I'm doing this, there's heaps of tabs along here with some really detailed information. One of them in particular is the Analytics tab, which is very powerful. It's actually just saying that we've had 5% growth in the last quarter already within Wollongong. It's already started to move. We can see a lot of the important volume, yields, vacancies, all of the average for sale, for rent, sold prices. But the basic tab here is where I wanted to get some key information. Currently, two-bedroom units are at most in demand and most common. That's what I want to focus on. So potentially, I don't really want to be investing over here in the western part of Wollongong CBD, even if it is a defined Ripehouse sweet spot, just because it might have too high clusters of houses, which are not really demanded by the core of the market here. Just to note, we are obviously in the CBD area. It's got great amenity with shopping, etc. We've got the train line, which is the core commuter hub all the way through to Sydney. For those people that do work in Sydney, live in Wollongong, very important that we are close to that. And we're also very close with transport injections onto the major highway. And we've got University of Wollongong, which is not far away at all, and as one of the larger employers in the area. At this point, let's do some street level analysis. Each of the key metrics that I look at a street level are provided as an individual toggle over here on the right-hand side. We can click on those toggles and we can see that element presented visually on the map. In this case, I've clicked on, in this session, in this particular example, I've clicked on the public housing toggle. The darker the red, the higher the public housing here. Each of these geographic areas mapped onto the map has 200 dwellings in them. Darker the red, the higher the public housing. 8% public housing is higher than the suburb, the estate average of 4.4%. So that's a little bit of a red flag for me. I have to be sure that I'm not investing in a street area without too much public housing. This particular area here has 41% public housing. That is an area to strictly be avoided. In these areas of recently, higher than average public housing, 8%. I generally wouldn't go above 15% public housing in my street area. From my experience and research, once you start dipping above 15% in the individual street area, you're going to start to see decreases in street appeal for property. That public housing may be evident and it may result in you being hamstrung to index rental increases going forward, and on the back of rental increases, capital growth going forward. So just something to be aware of. Each of these toggles down the sides can quickly demonstrate to you exactly where things are in the suburbs. So this one here, the darker the yellow, the higher the clusters of tenancy. A lot of tenant focus through the train line here in the middle, but a lot of owner-occupiers choosing to live here in the south pocket of the suburb. So you can click on any of these areas and you can view the specific information for the area. Very important. And another thing to note potentially is if you've got a minimum yield requirement, and you would have generally have crossed Wollongong off your list, 3.7% yield in the suburb overall is quite low. If you had a 5% yield requirement, you can actually target the yielding areas in the suburb of the highest yield. This particular street area actually delivers a 5.2% yield. So you can make the suburb work if you look at this granular, hyper-local perspective. Lots of toggles there to play around with. You can see the core amenities, the investment hotspots, the particular areas that may be gentrifying faster than other areas, lots of things to play with. If you wanted to go back out another level, you can actually provide suburb level research. So you can actually see surrounding areas that have high capital growth scores. So these the darker the blue areas, the higher the capital growth score, the higher the score for flipping. So Kirraville here is an excellent flipping candidate. And then also this one, the darker the orange, the higher the cash flow candidacy. So it's not just high yields, but it's also low vacancies, stable tenancies, high rental volumes delivers high capital growth score. For some regions across Brisbane, we've got flood zonings mapped onto the map, so you can actually see exactly where flood at risk areas are on the map, view them visually, and then filter properties in and out. We'll deliver that across some key Brisbane locations. But what we're trying to do now is we're trying to find the key sweet spots within Wollongong. We can do that very simply by clicking on the sweet spots custom overlay here. If you can remember those 5 key elements that I did look at and mention in the slide there that constitutes a sweet spot, we can quickly set our tolerances for each of those key metrics, and by clicking on the capital growth button here. That will then preset the tolerances for each of those. So public housing, it will max out at 15%. Property type, it will focus on units. Rent per week, it will focus on higher than average rents, higher than average yields, and lots of between that 30 and 70% tenants. It does it automatically. It's actually, those settings now are the Ripe House sweet spots, which are going to deliver by average over 21% capital growth when compared to Wollongong overall. When you add them onto the map, you can see them there highlighted in orange. And in this case, I want to filter properties out of the 68 currently on the market to be located only in those areas. And I want them to be 2 or 3 bedroom units, which are the most in-demand property type. Whenever I see 2 or 3 bedroom units as the most in-demand and common property type, I always add the other one in as well. They are quite similar, and these potentially it is worth sort of looking at the other option as well. There's quite, I suppose, a little bit of logic and research that I could spend another webcast going into in that decision. When a 3-bedroom house is also most in demand, I'll include 4 bedrooms into the mix as well. Not necessarily paying more for that 4th bedroom, but I do want to obviously see them on the market. So in this case, I'm just clicking on 2 3-bedroom apartments located in the sweet spot defined orange areas. That's going to take a little bit of while, a few moments to think there. And in doing that filter, but you can see now it's very quickly brought us down to 6 properties on the market, which is dramatically less. Obviously, it's now focusing on the absolute upside, the absolute sweet spots, and the absolute properties in the suburb that are going to potentially deliver the most capital growth. We can see them ordered there in terms of price, but we can also order in terms of discounting amount. Have they been discounted? Have they been on the market for too long? We can order them in different ways. We can filter properties based on their geography. We can draw a box on the map and remove them that way. But the most important thing potentially is we can click on each icon, view the individual images of the property, assess the likely condition of the property. So this is about potentially buying below market. How do we firstly assess the condition of the property in question? In doing that, I look at street appeal, obviously recency of development and building. It's quite a modern building here, probably 15 years old by the looks of it. Presented quite well for sale. It does have some compromising factors, floating floorboards, nice neutral wall colourings. It does have a blue feature wall there. It doesn't look too controversial, but it may affect some people walking in and going, wow, what's that? Does seem to be slightly dated kitchen and slightly dated bathroom, around that 15-year vintage. Great views by the look of it. So that, there are a lot of new developments in the area, so it is sort of starting to get onto the sort of middle market in terms of age. So I probably will be assessing this around the average condition, just looking at kitchen, bathroom, presentation, interior, quality of finishings and age, and street appeal. They are my core elements. I am rating each of those on a scale of poor, average and good, putting it into each of those buckets, taking an average at this point. You're obviously going to go into a lot more detail when you're right down towards making an offer. At this point, I'm just wanting to establish a baseline condition for the property, and that's all about establishing what an apple is, and then making sure we go off and find other comparables that are in a similar condition and comparing it apples with apples. So in this case, I'm assessing the condition as average. We have an automated algorithm within Ripehouse that will assess the condition of the property for you. This is self-learning, so I'm going to override that. It's assessed as in good condition and has been thrown off slightly. I'm going to override that. And once I override that and actually declare this property is in average condition, it's actually going to learn from that. It's going to get better. And then next time around, it's actually going to improve its guess. It's constantly getting better, and we're actually refining this day after day. And that's going to go away and now find other comparables that are also more likely to be in a similar condition for us. We can see the full listing history of the property. So it came on the market on the 18th of August at 570. We can see suburb level KPI information that was actually displayed before. We can see area level information. So this is just checking and balancing it against our sweet spot analysis. It's going to go away. All properties sold that are relevant as comparables, it's going to list them, but it's going to take a lot of the grunt work out of it for you, and it's going to prioritize the properties that are returned as comparables into a top 5. Now, it's our job here to actually take the time to curate this list. I can see 2 properties that are quite outside the other 3. We've got one at 800, which is obviously a very superior property. Very nice, modern, very modern apartment in very good condition. Obviously, that's superior. We can remove that. I can see another property jumping out at me at 300. It seems to be far smaller in dimensions. It looks like a holiday lease. I won't jump into that. Just as an example, we can remove that. And it's all about owning this list of comparable analysis. We can see, based on the automated condition assessment, it's gone through all relevant comparables. It's allocated a condition to those. We can see the average price for 3-bedroom units in average condition, according to our sentiment analysis, is 490. In good condition is 624. So that's the differential. That's demonstrating the accuracy of our algorithm there to an extent. It is going to be more likely to bring you back comparables that are in a similar condition to the property in question. We can own this process down to the nth degree and be 100% confident with our 5 comparables, and then leverage that process in our negotiation with the selling agent. In this case, it's going to take the average of 5. I can see between 420 and 530. It's going to take an average of those and take that through to the appraisal stage. So it's very important to do this. It's going to set the baseline appraisal at 480. It's going to run the property through a series of filters and demonstrate yes, it's in a really good spot in terms of shopping, probably a little bit too far away from the closest school, transports, a little bit far away from that train station. Public housing is not really a concern, but it's going to spit out the final appraisal price. So obviously we've got a little bit of difference there between our appraisal and the asking price. That would require me really to go in and own that process of comparable analysis, just really vet each individual comparable. You will notice, so it has spat out the estimated rent and yield for the property, and you can print all that off in a report. You will notice down here on the bottom right-hand side of the screen that we've got an online chat area. Jump in if you want us to vet and approve and work through the process of these appraisals with you in real time. Jump in and ask any questions. We're on hand to do that process, and my staff and customer service have got experience in using the software to do that with you. So we're always on hand to do that at any time. I have gone through the real meat of doing a pretty comprehensive analysis of Wollongong there. There are a couple of other street areas obviously in the northern part of Wollongong CBD that are lining up very nicely. If we did zoom in, we can see those. One thing, I'm just going to jump in, and this is a bit of a cheat sheet. I'm going to flip through a few areas now that are also offering high potential in the Wollongong area. So let's click on North Wollongong. Let's just very quickly then apply the sweet spot analysis because if we do that, click on the capital gains toggle. The two areas that are selected as sweet spots within North Wollongong are actually on the other side of the border to our sweet spots in Wollongong CBD. So a lot of parallels there between the two suburbs and the reasons why demand and likely capital growth is going to occur, all based around that train station not too far away. That is a core driver of demand within Wollongong. So that's a bit of a cheat sheet number two. Wollongong CBD and Wollongong North, look to those particular sweet spots areas there on the border of and surrounding the border of each for 2 or 3 bedroom units as the core in-demand property type. There are a couple on the market that are, I think this one here is number 134 Pleasant Avenue. So this is a slightly lower price point, a slightly older building, but it's right in that sweet spot at 410 on the market. That's another one to look at potentially. And then we've got this one over here at 914 to 16 Virginia Avenue in that northern Wollongong area. Now, talking to Terry and the reasons why Wollongong did pop onto our list, you've got a bit of a ripple effect coming with price in Sydney. People are sort of looking a little bit further out. Reasonable amenity to the Sydney CBD on the train. A lot of commuters sort of doing that process or undertaking the train journey every day. Do look further north. So high capital growth scores within the Ripe House scoring system of East Corrimal. So do look there as well. Also up to Bulli at a slightly higher price point. Look to Bulli along the train line also for nice sales volume spiking, days on market is stable or decreasing, and rent per week increasing. One bit of a caveat there, lots of owner occupiers in both of those suburbs. So you might have trouble finding the sweet spots. And the other bonus points is Ostomer, which is definitely a far more prestige and higher price point, but that is evidencing strong capital growth upside potential in the next, or at least in the short term, based on the demand, supply and balance. And that is obviously on that train line as well. So 3 bonus suburbs there. In recent conversations, as I mentioned with Matt Knight, he's very bullish of the Lake Illawarra area. So he was mentioning areas that were on the shoreline, particularly the southern shores. So he was mentioning the 3 suburbs of Lake Illawarra, Wirrala, and also, sorry, I just need to zoom in here, Mount Rawingle. He was evidencing lots of demand. You've got key amenities being created and Shell Cove Marina to the south, which has driven prices up around that area with higher priced new housing. He was liking and seeing the demand, lots of demand in that area at the moment. And he did also talk and mention closer down towards Nowra based on the new Berry bypass. One little particular, well, I will actually go into Mount Rawinga. So I'm just using the click to search functionality here. Let's put that. Mount Rawingle, sorry. Yeah, so with Mount Rawingle, there is some. There isn't actually some defined sweet spots. The problem that I'm seeing here is public housing. So we've got 9% public housing here. We've got some very dark clusters up here towards the main highway, the New Lake Entrance Road, where you're sort of seeing 30% public housing. A little bit of an asterisk against that. Do potentially talk to some agents with the properties in those areas because they would generally be sweet spots if we did buff around our public housing acceptance, which I don't usually like to do. Once you sort of adjust that out, you'll actually find a couple of sweet spots. And there's lots of property on the market in those 2 sweet spots if you do accept that level of public housing, which I'm not really advising. Potentially the public housing may be clustered over in one particular street area, which is completely public housing, and it may be mitigated somewhat. My other point is there's generally very low levels of tenants in each of these 3 suburbs. So even though they're recommended for their capital growth potential, we might have patchy tenancies, inability to leverage and index rents, and yeah, it might not suit capital growth for an investor, where it would suit capital growth for an owner-occupier. So yeah, there's a little bit of buying problems through here for capital growth investors, apart from potentially these two sweet spots here in Mount Warringal, and there's 5 properties on the market at the moment. But do check public housing in those streets is the way to sum it up. Yeah, do jump in. I can pop the suburb list through to you if you'd like, if you want me to sort of document those and send them through. But I have sort of tried to do a pretty thorough analysis of Wollongong. I am seeing a lot of suburbs throughout Wollongong that are reasonably stack up quite well, like Fig Tree and West Wollongong. Don't really have many sweet spots because of the owner-occupier levels. And then other suburbs that do have sweet spots have very little stock on market. So you're actually not really going to see any properties come onto the market, or not very likely to come onto the market, that are not in this, that are in the sweet spot. So I hope you found that beneficial. I'm just going to switch over screens once again, just one moment while I do that. Do jump in at any time with any questions. I'm on hand to answer any questions around Wollongong after the presentation. I am aware of time, so I'm just going to skip through the things very quickly, so I do apologise. Just be sure when you are monitoring and assessing condition of property, that's very critical to assess fair market value, that you compare suburb like for like. So you're comparing properties versus other properties in the suburb in question. The whole process, do check out our Buyer's Guide to Property Investment and our Know Your Purchase Strategy ebooks. That's available through our blog. Down in the bottom right-hand part of the screen, you'll have a pop-up where you can enter in your email address and receive those publications. I have detailed the process of potentially buying below market, assessing that fair market value first, assessing the property condition and making sure the comparables are similar. Then you're leveraging information that you have about the property and sales, a listing history to potentially negotiate under. Now, Ripe House is a community of DIY property investors. We're here to provide members-only research, help and support, which is integrated into the page at any time. We're here to work with you in any way we can and provide case studies and special group webinars to help you avoid spinning your wheels. Our tools, as demonstrated and provided, assist in making decisions and key decisions quickly and breaking the process down so it gives you confidence in your diligence process. Now, a lot of the information and research that is provided here is used by the professionals and professionals in the industry as best practice and ways to research property. And we nurture, we don't leave you alone. We want to provide special research and tutelage and live support at any time with any questions. So we're with you on your journey in using the Ripe House community. Just a little bit about some of the people that have been using Ripe House and saying good things about it. So Terry Ryder, we do a lot of work with Terry at his suburban regional level research. He loves Ripe House and how it does help people with that street level drill downs. Jane Slack-Smith, do check out, I know at 2 o'clock she is launching her twice a year Ultimate Guide to Renovation courses. It's an amazing content in her courses in renovating property for profit and selecting properties that are potentially going to give you the upside in that renovation. So do check that out. She's an amazing educator, gets a lot out of Ripe House. Dave Ward's a buyer's agent who has been using the Ripe House tools and getting a lot out of it. And Guy Williams also is a very experienced investor going back some 20 years. And he's been successfully using Ripe House to buy throughout Logan, I think into Ballarat, and he's just also settled in Salisbury, which is a property run past me recently. So that's just a little bit of insight into others that are using Ripe House. Ripe House is generally a subscription service that's available at $797 per year. I really appreciate you taking the time out and joining me for this webcast on Wollongong in Focus. And as a really nice special thank you for joining me, I'd love to offer you a $100 discount on that price, bringing it down to $697. That's only going to be available as a thank you today only. You can jump onto, I will be sending an email out. You can jump over to the right-hand side of your screen now. I'll just switch it on and lock in that offer for that discount amount. Just letting you know, we have recently moved over to Stripe, which is best practice. It's coming out of America, but it's distributed across the world now. It's the best practice in payment processing and security. We have integrated that into our page. The subscribe to Ripe House button will take you through to our Meet Ripe House page, and our bonus page, which has this $100 discount activated for today only. As a really big thank you, and to bring you on board and make sure you are getting the most out of Ripe House and getting the most out of your property selection, moving you towards your property goals faster and more effectively. I'm opening my time up with you as an annual subscriber only with this Ripe House webcast discount for one-on-one personal coaching with me. In that, I can jump on Skype, phone, email, work with you very closely in your first property purchase or your next property purchase, and let's get moving together. So that's my commitment, and that's the discount and offer I'd really like to offer you for joining us. You can lock that in also via this website address, www.ripehouse.com.au/bonus. As I mentioned, that's for today only, but I will also send through an email in the next hour or so, which will have the details to lock that in. So 3 ways you can do it. And also, as an added extra, I have referred to the National Top 10 report quite a lot throughout today. As a member and signing up, you do actually receive that report for free. Normally, it's valued at $154. Join as today's special offer, $100 discount on the annual subscription, one-on-one coaching with myself, and that free report as a baseline. It's basically a cheat sheet for across the whole country, how we can assess regions, suburbs, streets, and properties that are going to really match our strategy. So we can basically pick and choose amongst that report for the suburbs that are really going to match our price point, our yield, our region of interest and confidence, and pick and choose a suburb from that top 10 to really suit what we're trying to do. And I can work you in that process. So yeah, once again, that URL is www.ripehouse.com.au/bonus. Live chat and email support integrated into the page. So if you've got any questions there, do jump in. We are powered by Stripe, is our payment processor. Very powerful and very secure. It will integrate into the page with a payment pop-up there. If you've got any questions around that, do jump onto the chat, as I mentioned. Thank you for sticking out and taking the time out from your day. If you've got any questions, there's my personal details. I'll pop the audio on mute for a moment and give you a few moments to ask any questions that you do have. And as mentioned, I am happy to stick around for a little while and go into individual suburbs for you if you'd like to take the time to do that. So I'll pop the microphone on pause. If you don't want to stick around for questions, thank you so much for coming and joining me today for Wollongong in Focus. I hope you found it interesting and insightful. There will be a recording of this going onto our YouTube channel, so if there was anything that you did miss, or if it was a little bit blurry for you, the recording is usually very, very clear. Do jump onto that recording. I think it actually comes under my personal name, which is jacob.fjord, but do search for Wollongong in Focus, and that will you'll be able to see the recording that way. So once again, thank you. I'll come back in a moment with some questions. Okay, I'll come back. So keep the questions coming through, or any areas you'd like me to focus on. I've got a few questions, multiple questions coming through from Sandy, and thanks for your nice, kind words around the analytics tool. Sandy's asking, would Werribee in Victoria be a potential sweet spot? Let's jump in and I'll share that screen. Sorry, I should have done this before I came back on with the mic. Let me know when you can see that coming through. Let's just jump into Werribee itself. In the top 10 sweet spot report, we also had Epping and the northern area of Melbourne generally, Crackieburn, etc., opened up to the Melbourne CBD with the improvements in the rail and infrastructure spend by the government. And we also had featured in that report Cranbourne in the southeast of Melbourne, down inland from Frankston. Werribee wasn't one of those two, but also mentioned, so I'm just actually trying to get my bearings here. No, it's a little bit too further out. So also in those, so as I did mention, Terry did provide me a list of 20. I think there was Sunshine also that did miss the cut. But also Geelong. So Geelong generally for Terry is an area that's got lots of upside moving forward. So Werribee is right in the middle. So it was the Sunshine District also in Melbourne that was in that top 20 provided. Nothing specifically mentioned about Werribee. Let's fall back potentially, view our catchment area, which is the viewable area on the screen here for Werribee, and then click on the capital growth score. So not a huge amount of darker areas surrounding Werribee itself. Look, let's do a street by street analysis. I do know Werribee. I do know the price point's quite at 350 median price approximately, it is quite accessible by a very large audience. You do have the train line into the city. Lots of things going for Werribee. It is in between Geelong as a defined sort of regional hotspot and the Melbourne CBD. Capital growth upside for the region and suburb overall aside, I am not seeing anything jump out from any of the experts I've talked to in the Melbourne region for Werribee specifically, Sandy. However, if you were to invest there and you have chosen to invest there for whichever reason, and do share with me potentially the reason why you would like to invest there, I can particularly, I can tweak my view towards that. Let's look for some individual streets within Werribee that we might want to focus on. Public housing, 3% is quite low. There are some dark red areas potentially that we might want to avoid. This area of 30% public housing, it's on the corner of Shores Road and Market Road, in and around that area. 30% public housing is going to be, clearly defined area of public housing in the suburb. It's going to probably be an area that locals tend to avoid and not go near. 30% public housing, I hate to say it, and I don't like to speak this way, but you're going to start seeing dramatic outward effects of that public housing. So you're going to see a lot of maybe boarded up houses, burnouts on the street, no front fences. People are going to, if you have your property on the market to rent, you're going to have some people who are attracted to the low rent that you're going to get for the property, but you're going to get a lot of locals and potential for people moving into the area, coming into the street and being turned off. So it's going to hamstring you, or hamstrung, sorry. On the flip side, if you do know, and I've spoken and worked with many investors, and I have done this personally myself in Dubbo, invested in the high public housing areas. I'm talking 70, 80, 90% public housing in some of the north and west areas of Dubbo. Investing there knowing that it is being gentrified, and that particular west area of Dubbo was gentrified faster than other areas throughout Dubbo. You can actually leverage that if you are aware of owner-occupier buyback schemes, etc. Potentially with 30% public housing, it's not dense enough for that to cause any problems, at a policy level. But at our personal level, I'd probably avoid this area. Also, some 24%, 22% public housing over here in the east area of the suburb. Lots of other toggles we can go into, but let's just do a sweet spot analysis. We've got lots of 96 areas in the suburb overall. Each of those areas, once again, has 200 dwellings generally, so that's a huge amount of dwellings across Werribee. Based on our standard sweet spot, Ripe House sweet spot, we've got 12 areas that have actually been selected. I like to see when these 12 areas that have been actually selected, it is around 10 or 15% of the suburb, which is generally what we see with the Ripe House sweet spot. When there's a larger number of areas that are being selected as a sweet spot, I like to see strength in numbers. So I like to see a cluster, like we're seeing here in the north area of Werribee, almost near the Pacific Werribee shopping centre. That cluster is a lot of people living in that area of the suburb for similar reasons, and a lot of upwards pressure that demand is causing on rents and then yields and then capital growth to follow. I really like seeing those clusters. potentially these outliers are not, not as heavy weight applied to those. So that's where I'll potentially be focusing, Sandy, in the suburb. Let's look at what is the current in-demand property type. 3-bedroom houses are most commonly in demand. So let's just do a quick filter. So we've got lots of properties on the market. We've got 278 properties on the market. Custom strategy, 3 and 4-bedroom houses. Sorry, I am going to have to refresh the page here because my browser didn't catch up. So that's just going to take a few seconds to load all that because we've got lots and lots of properties. Still waiting. I do apologise. There's lots of thinking going on with the browser, and it's also been slowed down by the webcast session that's slowing down my internet connection. It is processing away there in the background. Sorry, Sandy. Thank you for saying thank you. Yeah, we are going through, generally suburbs don't have 278 properties on the market. Werribee is a very large geographic area. It's gone away. It's now found those properties that we are interested in on the market. I have zoomed in on the sweet spot area, so we can see that there's 4 properties that match our criteria, ranging between 288, 309, 413. One of them is under contract. One of them has just come on the market at 0 days on market. Another one's coming out towards 77 days on market. So your street addresses there, Sandy: 46 Cassowary Avenue, 7 Warbler Close, 13 Diana Drive, a nice potential there. We can jump in and do an appraisal on those, etc., but potentially grab me separately to do that, or jump into the tool to do that. Just because we've got Tom requesting a little bit of a look at Warrnambool in Victoria. I'll just jump into there. So once again, Tom, it might be worth jumping into Terry's website and potentially looking and downloading his top 5 regional hotspots of Victoria report. I'm not sure personally if Warrnambool is included in that report or not. Yeah, he may disclose some research or demonstrate some research about the specifics and investment specifics of Warrnambool. Once again, 3-bedroom houses are most common. Just going away now and loading up the properties on the market. So my connection's a little bit slow in doing that. Once again, 157 properties on the market in Warrnambool. Let's just jump in very quickly and do the sweet spot analysis that we can see. 76 areas, street level areas. If we type our sweet spot analysis, we've actually come back with 22. So that's actually probably, what's that, 30% of the suburb overall is qualifying for our sweet spots. That's a lot. It generally means when that happens that you've got quite a lot of tenants in the area, lots of areas of low public housing, and then some areas with very high public housing. When that happens, I don't really want to focus on 30% of the suburb. I actually want to focus on the absolute, key sweet spots in the suburb, and I'll start tightening up my range there to focus on those key areas. And 2 that I actually generally start tightening up, or generally in this case, I might start dropping public housing down and only accepting, say, if we do that 5% public housing, we're dropping it down to a more sustainable level of public housing as an example, and try and look for some clusters of sweet spots together. In this particular case, I am seeing a cluster down here on the specific Princess Highway, and a couple over here near Victoria Park Reserve, a couple also inland. I'll just get some street names for you there, Tom. Centred around the Centro Warrnambool. So Centro Warrnambool seems to be a strong driver of tenant demand and potential for high rent, high yield and capital growth on the back of that. Then we've also got the main road, and following that main road through towards the inner city CBD of Warrnambool, which is one of those nice right past sweet spots, areas of demand again. And then over here near the hospital seems to be another sweet spot area where that high demand is likely to lead to higher capital growth. So I hope that I know a couple of you are logging off now. I hope that's a little bit beneficial for you there, Tom and Sandy. I will leave it there. If you've got any other areas or things you'd like me to focus on, another user's jumped onto the chat as well and talking about Dapto. Jump in and grab me personally, or jump into live support and we can go from there. So once again, I really hope you have enjoyed and found today beneficial. That $100 sweet spot, $100 thank you, one-on-one coaching, and also the free top 10 sweet spots report offer is available for today only. Jump onto www.ripehouse.com.au/bonus to lock that in, and I look forward to working with you personally. So thank you once again.